Game day, getting you set for South Carolina and Vanderbilt. Tyler Head live from O'Hara's Bakery in downtown Lexington. Dave back in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios, and Elijah Campbell joining us live on a couple hours sleep from Nash Vegas itself. Elijah, how are we doing today?
Pretty good. I think you adequately described it. I pulled up into Nashville at about 4:20 local time. Was able to squeeze in a couple hours of sleep, but we have been pounding coffee. Shout out to my close friends Matt Case and Will Garner for housing me here. That way, I don't have to charge the company any money to be able to take care of my lodging. But I'm here sitting about 10 minutes away from Vanderbilt Stadium, and it's nice and chilly. I took their dog outside this morning to get some fresh air, and it's crisp. It's crisp. It feels like fall here in Nashville, Tennessee. So we're going to have some football weather. I can already feel that just from a couple hours of being up and moving.
Well, we'll get into the weather here in just a moment, and obviously Nashville, your old stomping grounds, very familiar with the Vanderbilt University and their football program, obviously. And when we go back to the summertime, when we were all looking at South Carolina's schedule and marking what games we thought they were going to win, which games we thought they were going to lose, everybody put a W next to this game because it's Vanderbilt. Of course, you're supposed to beat Vanderbilt. They're the doormat of the SEC that you're never supposed to have a problem with. And now we're sitting here in the second weekend of November. Vanderbilt has got 6 wins. They're bowl eligible, and they've already slayed one number one team in the country, and it's looking a whole lot tougher than we thought it was going to be.
Tyler, if during SEC Media Days, I came to you out of a time machine, right, like the one in Back to the Future, I crawl out of that bad boy, I walk to you to say, Tyler, the over-under in Vegas for Vanderbilt wins is 3.5. I'll spot you one game. They lose at Georgia State. How quickly would you have put an ungodly amount of money, an irresponsible amount of money on Vanderbilt's under 3.5 wins to hit this year?
Elijah, I might have bet my life savings on it, to be honest with you, because that is almost a sure thing. I would look at their schedule and said, you know what, congratulations on your 3-point win against Alcorn State, but you're not getting many after that. And, didn't think we'd be here talking about this team in this way.
No, because then the one thing that future Elijah would have left out of that equation was that they were going to lose to Georgia State, but then beat Alabama at home, then beat Auburn on the road, beat both of those schools in the same season for the first time since 1955. None of my parents were alive. I'm sure none of your parents were alive.
They were not.
I want to say, I don't even know how many. It's pre-JFK. Since the pre-Cold War was this since the last time that Vanderbilt beat those two teams in the same season. Oh yeah, and they beat Kentucky on the road. Oh, and when Missouri was still top 10 in the country, which feels like forever ago, and it's a travesty they're still ranked, but they took them to double overtime. So this is a Vanderbilt team that just completely defies the logic of what Vanderbilt football is supposed to be. And if you'd have told me that this team early at SEC Media Days back in July, that they would be bowl eligible by the time they played South Carolina, I simply wouldn't have believed you, especially considering what all they lost in the transfer portal and just how bad they were last season.
I don't think anybody would have believed you, to be honest. So a lot of stakes on this game. When you look at these two teams, we'll get into the breakdown of the specifics here as the show goes along, certainly, but very similar in a lot of ways. And two teams that I think have a really good case for being in the college football playoff top 25 rankings that came out earlier this week for the first time this season. Both those on the outside looking in, but I think we kind of look at this matchup as the winner might be in that top 25 come next week.
Has to be, right? I feel like these are the two teams that are out on the outside looking in, especially considering they have, like South Carolina, for instance, too. There is precedent of a 3-loss team being in the top 25 of the college football playoff with Louisville. And you look at Louisville's resume, they have a really good road win at Clemson. You look at South Carolina's best win, it's home against a top 10 team in the country at the time in Texas A&M. So you have comparable best wins, and all 3 losses aren't bad losses. Like Louisville's, all their losses are one-score games to really good teams, right? Teams that are, like Miami, who's undefeated, SMU, who is undefeated in ACC play with their only loss being to an undefeated team in BYU. Louisville doesn't have bad losses, and neither does South Carolina. And 2 of those 3 losses that Carolina has are by a combined 5 points. And those two teams are LSU and Alabama, who are basically playing in a college football playoff elimination game later on tonight as well. You look at those resumes, they're very comparable. So if Louisville's in, then it's safe to assume that you can slide South Carolina right in if they're able to take care of business today in Nashville. I have a good feeling that they do. I know we'll get into predictions later on in the show, but this is a game for either team. If you want a chance to be in that college football playoff top 25, this game can be your golden ticket in.
Absolutely. And again, plenty more to break down this matchup as the show goes along. Want to get into the injuries for this weekend. And for South Carolina, they've been relatively lucky, knock on wood, obviously, when it comes to injuries this season. We did have some concern about Mazio Bennett coming out of the last game as he did leave the game after basically having his head snapped on that one weird play that didn't get called for a foul.
With no
but he
face
seems
mask.
I know, for whatever reason, but he seems to be good to go. I know. He seems to be good to go, which will obviously be key for the passing game there. But on the other side of the football, DeAndre Jules and Nick Barrett both out for this game. And while South Carolina does have good depth on the interior of the defensive line, those two guys' presence, especially with their physical size, plugging those holes in the middle, definitely going to be missed today.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we talk about the strength of the South Carolina defense, and obviously Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart are the first two that come to mind because when your edge rushers are that elite, it forces everything in the defense or allows them to be better. I don't say forces, but allows them to be better. It allows your secondary, less time to have the other receivers get open. The front end helps the back end. And part of the front end helping the back end isn't just the edge rushers, but it's the depth that this Carolina team has in the defensive line. That if they want a hockey shift and be able to bring in a whole second unit on the defensive line, having guys like DeAndre Jules and Nick Barrett help you bring in competent players who are good in the run game and who are also able to give you pressure up the middle. And when those two guys aren't able to play, it's going to force some of your interior defensive linemen to have to play more snaps. So that tells me that you need to really avoid what Vanderbilt does well, and that's sitting on the ball, owning time of possession, and continuously moving the ball on first downs on third and short, right? They convert a ton of third and shorts. That's how they're able to sustain these long drives that allow them to have one of the highest average times of possession in all of college football. And if that's the case, and if you're not able to get them off of the field on those third and shorts, and they're able to sustain 10 to 15 play drives, by the time we get in the fourth quarter, fatigue might set in. I'll say might, because the South Carolina defense does a lot of things that a lot of people said they wouldn't be able to do at the beginning of the season. But that would just mean more stress on your Tonka Hemingways, your Boogie Huntleys, your TJ Sanders. As good as those players are, it is a luxury to be able to have guys like Nick Barrett and DeAndre Jules come in there and be able to relieve them for a little bit. What you really just don't want to do is force those big nasties in the middle right there to have to play more plays than normal. But as good as they are, I trust them to be able to take care of business there. It's just one thing to keep in mind when you would like to think about the effect of not having Jules and Barrett are on this team today.
Hopefully that's not going to be too much of an effect for South Carolina today. Weather-wise, there is some rain in the area. Looking at the forecast right now, it's supposed to be about high 60s, low 70s, with rain moving in that late afternoon, especially with two teams like to run the ball. It could be one of those nasty ground and pound type of wet, ugly football games that if you're an old school football fan, falls right into your category.
Yeah, it absolutely does. These are two teams that they play so similar in terms of what they do best on offense. They love the perimeter run game. They have a tight end that's an easy button, so a lot of the passes aren't going to naturally be downfield. I don't expect a ton of downfield shots in this game, especially if the rain kind of comes out as forecasted. I think it's going to be a heavy emphasis on who's able to get that big push on first and second down runs to create third and shorts. Because the last thing you want to do is have to be able to sling the ball across the yard on third and long if the weather's this bad. And then who's going to be able to take care of the football? Look, when it rains, that's going to make the football wet. All right, that's analysis for you. The rain will make the football wet, which makes you maybe a little more prone for fumbles, especially for quarterbacks. It will be a big emphasis on Diego Pavia and Lenore Sellers, both quarterbacks in this game, to have to be able to take care of the ball, even if the conditions allow for the ball to be a little more slippery than usual. That's something to keep an eye on.
That's a John Madden level of analysis. When it rains,
Boom.
Football's going to get wet.
Football's going to get wet. Man, say it rains, the football gets wet. Boom.
Well, of course, South Carolina coming off of a huge victory last weekend against number 10 Texas A&M over at Williams-Brice Stadium. We'll take a look back at that game last week, as well as get thoughts from our guy Ryan Brewer as he looks back on that game and looks ahead to today's game against Vanderbilt as well. It is Gamecocks Game Day. Tyler Head live from O'Hara's Bakery in downtown Lexington. Elijah Campbell from Nash Vegas getting set for today's game between South Carolina and Vanderbilt on the game. Welcome back in. It is Gamecocks Game Day. Tyler Head and Elijah Campbell along with you. I'm live at O'Hara's Bakery in downtown Lexington. Elijah Campbell live in Nashville getting you set for the Gamecocks and the Commodores. Coming up today, 4:15 kick right here on the game. Got to look back last week, though. Those highlights certainly did it justice as South Carolina ran all over Texas A&M, who came into Williams-Brice Stadium the number 10 team in the country, undefeated in conference play, leading the SEC. And South Carolina took them to the woodshed, especially in the second half of that game, to get over that 0-9 streak of losing to ranked teams last week.
Yeah, massive, absolutely massive. And I think the way you described it is the most accurate way to describe it, right? I mean, you don't score 44 points against a team like Texas A&M, who was number 1 in the SEC in rushing defense, unless you completely beat them over the head with a bag of hammers for 4 quarters. And in the line of scrimmage, that's exactly what they did. You don't run for 243 yards against Texas A&M if you're not controlling the line of scrimmage. And to do it against a Mike Elko coach team and that A&M team is an indictment that this was the best game the offensive line's played all year. And I think this was a display of this offense figuring out what they do best, and that's in the run game. Beat him out on the perimeter. Get Josiah Thompson out in space. Get him to be able to be a bulldozer and clear the way. And look, Lenore Sellers ran for over 100 yards. Rocket Sanders ran for over 100 yards. They destroyed A&M out on the perimeter. And we can talk about the defense all day because that's been obviously the strength of this team. But the biggest shock and takeaway is just exactly how the South Carolina offensive line, which has kind of been the Achilles heel of the team all season long, end up becoming the strength of the offense in the run blocking part.
Well, and prior to last week's game, Texas A&M had not allowed a 100-yard rusher at all this season. Like you said, Rocket Sanders and Sellers both going for over 100 in that game. And we saw the emergence of Lenore Sellers putting together a full 4 quarters of football. Yeah, the completion percentage needs to certainly improve, but he Houdini'd his way out of probably 7 or 8 sacks in that game. Things that we'd seen him do at times this year, but he did it over the course of the entire game last week. And we're saying, man, that is the Sellers we've been waiting to see. And if he plays like that, they can beat anyone.
It's wild to go back and look. When you look at the box score, you see a lot of eye-popping stats, right? The fact that South Carolina for most of the game was rushing for almost 8 yards an attempt. They did that for most of the game. And you look at how many yards Rocket Sanders ran for, how many Lenore Sellers ran for. But then you account that there were a lot of pressures that A&M was able to get on Sellers, but he broke out of a lot of them. Tyler Head, he broke 12 tackles. The quarterback made 12 men miss on trying to tackle. You cannot tackle Lenore Sellers up high. It's almost kind of like the Cam Newton rule. You cannot tackle him up high. You have to be able to take him out down low. And A&M learned that lesson the hard way, brother. And then Lenore Sellers also decided not only put on his Superman cape, but he said, you know what? I'm going to pretend to be Herschel Walker, like what he did to Bill Bates in the 80s. He did that to poor B.J. Mays. I'm sure B.J. Mays' body is still outlined in chalk over there near the 30-yard line at Williams-Brice Stadium because that was almost criminal how he ran that man over.
And it was obviously very critical to South Carolina picking up that win. But don't just take our word for it. Our guy Ryan Brewer, as always, gives his thoughts on last week's game and starts looking ahead to Vanderbilt with our weekly Brewer segment. Welcome back in. It is Gamecocks Game Day. Tyler Head and Elijah Campbell along with you. I'm live at O'Hara's Bakery here in downtown Lexington. Elijah on the ground in Nashville getting set for the Gamecocks and the Commodores coming up today. 4:15 kick all right here on the game. It is time to go behind enemy lines, and Elijah been talking about him all week. He's been one of the talks of college football this entire season. Diego Pavia is the straw that stirs the drink for this entire Vanderbilt team. There's a swagger that he comes to the field with and a belief that he brings to this team that helped them have that upset against Alabama, that helped them play Texas close a couple weeks and helped them get to the 6-win mark they have coming into this game today.
There's a reason that teams Diego Pavia is the quarterback for are 3-0 against Hugh Freeze coach teams. And in those 3 games, the average point spread is Diego Pavia being a 19-point underdog. It's because this guy's got irrational belief. He's got irrational belief in himself. Nobody with his build and his athleticism should believe they're as good as Diego Pavia believes Diego Pavia is, right? And that's infectious. Like that will spread through a locker room like wildfire. That is how a team who is at such an athletic disadvantage to a team like Alabama can beat Alabama, right? Like they have instilled a belief in themselves, and that's, credit to Diego Pavia, to Clark Lee, to Jerry Kill, who came over with Diego Pavia from New Mexico State and is basically a consultant on this Vanderbilt coaching staff. Diego Pavia is one of those guys, you look at his stats, and they're not eye-popping the same way you would look at like a Jaden Daniels last year, right? Or even this year, a Dylan Gabriel. But you look at what his impact is. He might not be the player of the year in the SEC, but he is the most impactful player or most valuable player in the SEC because of the intangibles that he has that makes this Vanderbilt team really good. That would never believe in a million years that Vanderbilt would be a team that has the capability of beating your Alabamas, your Auburns, Kentucky on the road, the wins that they've had this year. And it's because of Diego Pavia being able to be as crafty as he is and be able just to have that moxie that we love to use in sports as cliches all the time. But this guy really brings that part to life.
And one thing that he does really well, and I go back to that upset against Alabama, he buys time. And again, when he's under duress, he can make plays with his feet and scramble and just let things develop down the field. And when he typically does that, he's looking for his guy, Eli Stowers, who also transferred over with him from New Mexico State. Those guys are a great connection. And when nothing's happening, he can usually find him for, if nothing else, a short gain and trying to get a first down. So 2 guys to be looking out for. Again, that transferred over from New Mexico State. In addition to getting Tim Beck, the offensive coordinator, in addition to getting Jerry Kill, as you mentioned, coming over as a consultant now, they basically transplanted what they did last year at New Mexico State on offense, brought it to Vanderbilt, and it's working really, really well thanks in part to Diego Pavia.
Yeah, this summer's pipeline from Las Cruces, New Mexico to Nashville, Tennessee has never been stronger, but it's been a huge impact. You just talk about all those guys that came over. It's not just Diego, but you mentioned Eli Stowers and Tim Beck, the offensive coordinator, who runs a really creative, eye candy heavy offense. That's a team at New Mexico State, the program that never wins anything, won a whole lot of games, won conference titles in the Conference USA, and they ran that conference for a while. I mean, that is just a testament to how good that program is. It became under the leadership of those guys. But I like how you mentioned Eli Stowers too. That's one thing that I find as a similarity between South Carolina and Vanderbilt in their offenses. Your passing game easy button is your tight end, right? And Josh Simon doesn't have to go down the field very far to be effective for South Carolina. Neither does Eli Stowers. He's only got about an average depth of target of 7 yards. But that's because when they get in these third and short situations, a lot of teams oftentimes sell out for the run. And then if Diego Pavia is able to slip out the pocket, Stowers is always there. He's the most reliable receiver on this team. You have a couple other guys, too, that can be playmakers. Junior Sherrill, one that comes to mind, who's a fantastic local athlete from here in Nashville, played for Trent Dilfer at David Lipscomb Academy and was highly coveted by other high-level Power 4 schools, was a big get for Clark Lee. He can help stretch the field, but Eli Stowers is that absolute easy button whenever they get into third and short that South Carolina is going to have to be able to watch for, and he can create mismatches, even for some of your best coverage linebackers.
I'm glad you mentioned third and short because this is one of the most effective teams in the entire country when it comes to third downs. Vanderbilt completing 46% of them. However, most of those are third and shorts. If they are in anything of more than 4 yards, so 5 and up, they are only completing 30% of the third downs because they are an offense that's more predicated on the run, running the ball 62% of the time. Diego Pavia, again, a hit or miss kind of passer. If you can get him in third and longs, you can keep him off the field. If they're routinely in 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, they're going to keep the ball moving. They're going to keep the ball on the field, and they're going to end up having a time of possession like they did against Alabama, where they hold the ball for 42 minutes.
Would you agree with this assessment, Tyler? I think Vanderbilt is maybe the most self-aware football team in all of college football. They know who they are.
That's pretty fair.
And they know who they're not. And what they're not is this high-octane offense that's just going to be chucking the ball down the field. They're not going to convert a lot of 3rd and 15s. Look, last week against Auburn, they won 17-7, and the offense wasn't very good. And then you ask yourself, why is Vanderbilt's offense worse against Auburn than it was against Alabama? Well, their average third down distance in the Alabama game was less than 5 yards. Against Auburn, it was significantly greater. They were 4 and 6. They're 4 for 16 on third down because they were consistently put behind the chains on 1st and 2nd down. Auburn gave a pretty good blueprint to South Carolina on what they can do to limit Vanderbilt's offense, and that's really win the battle on 1st and 2nd down. That's important in a lot of games, but today it's going to be a lot more important because this Vanderbilt team is able to dominate games in time of possession because they're really good and efficient on 1st and 2nd down, and they want 3rd and shorts. They want long drives because they know if you get in a possession for possession battle, they're not going to win that very often because they're not very explosive. And part of their self-awareness is just knowing that this is how they win games. They slowly and methodically march up and down the field, get the points. They've got a really reliable kicker who's got insane range. So there's really not range that Brock Taylor is not in. His accuracy may be hit or miss, but he's always got the leg for it. So they trust their special teams to convert the points. They trust the offense to get 3rd and shorts. So they're not afraid to march up and down the field. And they know that if they can sit on the ball like for 30 minutes like they did against Alabama, you're going to have to be better than 3 yards per play against them. Because in the Alabama game, Alabama outgained them 3 yards on a per play basis and still lost because of that right there.
And when you look at this team defensively, look, they don't have any superstars players, but they are certainly a sum of their parts. Very efficient in a lot of areas in the SEC, including against the run, much like Texas A&M last week coming into the game against South Carolina, only allowing about 111 yards on the ground per game so far this year. They got guys that can get after the quarterback. Corday Sindor on the defensive line, 4 sacks this year. Nick Rinaldi at linebacker, 4 sacks as well. Brian Longwell, a guy that's all over the field as the team's leading tackler. Again, no like first-round superstars by any means, but very efficient when they work together as a unit on defense.
Yeah, they're better. Yeah, the whole is better than the sum of its parts. I think it's a really good way of putting it. And they've got a lot of guys who some of them played here for a while. Langston Patterson had a really good year last year. He's one of the higher run defensive graded players on this team. Led the team in tackles last year, and I believe he's like 2nd in tackles right now. But he's one of those guys too. He's just a steady, sure-handed tackler, and along with being incredibly self-aware on offense. He is every bit. This team is every bit as good defensively at the fundamentals. And if there's anything Clark Lee has mastered as a great defensive coordinator from his time at Notre Dame, is that his defenses were always fundamentally sound. I 1,000% agree with your assessment. Ain't none of these guys going to be wowing you on Sundays, but these guys don't do the things that hurt themselves, like dumb penalties, missing tackles, losing composure, jumping off sides on maybe a 3rd and short. But this team just really masters the fundamentals, and that really has raised the floor for this defense. The ceiling may never be really high. They will never be South Carolina's defense, but the floor is raised significantly on a game-by-game basis because of how solid they are.
And as you mentioned with special teams, Brock Taylor, 16 of 19 on the year, did make a 57-yarder against Missouri, and is 5 of 6 from 50-plus yards, so that could be a big key in what might be a low-scoring game today. And then their punter, Jesse Murko, transfer from Ohio State, 4th best punting average in the SEC. So a team that is very efficient when it comes to special teams. We'll take a look at South Carolina's offense, defense, and special teams coming up next as Gamecocks Game Day rolls on. Tyler Head live from O'Hara's Bakery in Lexington. Elijah Campbell on the ground in Nashville, getting you set for the Gamecocks and the Commodores coming up today at 4:15. All right, here on the game. Welcome back in. It is Gamecocks Game Day. Tyler Head and Elijah Campbell along with you. I'm live out at O'Hara's Bakery here in downtown Lexington. Elijah Campbell at Buddy's house, correct, in Nashville, getting all the coffee that you can ahead of today's game. Am I right on that?
That is correct. Shout out my boy Matt Case and Will Garner for housing me here this weekend and letting me use their Keurig to be about 3 cups
Clutch.
of coffee deep so I can run off a few hours of sleep. Running on black coffee and enthusiasm, baby. That's how this thing keeps it rolling.
Elijah takes in enough caffeine per day to kill a small horse, for those that are not aware of that. Time to take a look at South Carolina's offense, defense, and special teams. And obviously everything starts with Lenore Sellers at quarterback. And I go back to last week where he finally had that true breakout performance. We'd seen him make plays at times throughout the entire year, get out of trouble, make good throws, make good runs, but he finally put it together for 4 quarters last week. If he can play like that, I said this earlier, there's no team that South Carolina can't beat, and especially with weather being in the forecast today that might be limiting the passing game, Sellers going to have a similar type performance today, I think.
Absolutely. And the best trend with Lenore Sellers, right, in the last 2 games and these dominant wins, Lenore Sellers has committed as many turnovers of the football as you and I have, Tyler. That number is 0.
That's right.
He has not turned the ball over himself. South Carolina, as an offense, has only turned it over once, and that was the Rocket Sanders fumble late in the first half against A&M, which thankfully turned out to be inconsequential. But early in the season, the thing that kind of hindered this offense was pass protection and then Lenore's fumbling the football. I think he's developed now a great sense of pocket presence. When the pocket's breaking down, not just that the pocket is breaking down, it's where it's breaking down from. And you saw in the A&M game that as soon as he felt pressure from any side of the pocket, he didn't just know to bail, he knew where to bail. And then when he bailed, he broke tackles. When he broke tackles, he moved the chains. And then you saw this offense be able to get ahead of said chains, move them, and be able to move up and down the field efficiently enough to be able to score 44 points on one of the better defensive units in the SEC and in college football. I think he's reaching a point now where he is developed in his sense of pocket presence and his ability to break tackles and embracing the physicality of just what his body provides. Not many quarterbacks in all college football are built like Lenore Sellers. And this team is figuring out that when they can get him to the perimeter and they can get him running to the outside and get the run blockers to help in and get your perimeter blockers, which have also improved dramatically with your receivers and tight ends, that's probably how this offense functions at its best.
Well, and obviously you don't want to have your quarterback be under constant stress and have to, again, Houdini his way out of about 8 sacks. But we know the offensive line is what it is. It's not magically going to get better overnight. So if Sellers can play like that once again, then they should have a pretty good day coming up today. You mentioned Rocket Sanders. Again, fantastic performance last week, just like Lenore Sellers did on the ground. And we've seen him at times this year. I've been banged up with injuries as well. But when he is on, he is absolutely on. When he was able to get outside those tackles and start breaking tackles on the outside and get those big, huge chunk runs, he was almost impossible to bring down. We certainly hope that's going to be the same case today as well.
I can't tell you, Tyler Head, how many times I have watched a few of those touchdown plays and from Rocket Sanders or from the Gamecocks in general, and how good the offensive line was pinning and pulling, and they're able to pull guards and get them out in space. Kamar Bell pancakes some dudes out in space. Josiah Thompson as a tackle pancakes some dudes out in space, and that is helping Rocket Sanders immensely. There's no coincidence that we had the best run blocking game from the South Carolina offensive line. And then you also had Rocket Sanders' best game as a Carolina running back, because the guy's done wonders this year in terms of breaking tackles. He's had a few 3-yard gains this year, which required a ton of effort, which should have been 3-yard losses, because that's how physical of a runner he is. He proved last Saturday that if you give the guy space to run, he is going to make things happen. And for the first time this year, we saw him being an ultimate weapon in the passing game. What was it? Second play of the game, pocket breaks down. Lenore has to scramble out. Rocket Sanders was running down the sideline. He runs a comeback route near the sideline. Bam, open, first down. He had 92 receiving yards as well, leading the Gamecocks in receiving yards, because he can also be reliable in the pass game, especially when you kind of have to improvise a little bit, right? That's one of the biggest strengths that Rocket Sanders has, that toughness and that experience to be able to, when plays break down, be able to find a space in the defense, as well as running the ball and just being a physical presence and making the defense feel him.
When you go to the defensive side of the ball for South Carolina, again, DeAndre Jules and Nick Barrett going to be missing from the interior of that defensive line. But, of course, everything starts with those guys coming off the edge in Dylan Stewart and in Kyle Kennard. This is an offensive line with Vanderbilt that's only allowed 11 sacks so far this year. That's 35th. best in the nation, as we've talked about, just like Lenore Sellers. Diego Pavia, very slippery, able to get out of some of those sacks, buy his time, make plays downfield. He's going to be very hard to contain today, though he is a little bit nicked up coming into this game, was listed on the injury report this week, so he may not be at 100% in this game today. And if South Carolina can get after him, lay some hard hits on him earlier on in that game, you might be able to hold him at bay today.
Pass rushing in early downs, I think, will probably be the biggest key for South Carolina defensively. Yeah, the stat you mentioned is remarkable that he's only been sacked 11 times this year. Pressured more, and there has been some weak spots on this Vanderbilt offensive line. They have a tackle named Chase Mitchell, who is the lowest graded pass blocker on this Vanderbilt offensive line at 44. He's given up 17 pressures, but Diego Pavia has been a magician and has not been sacked in any of them. That is not an indictment on Chase Mitchell. It's an indictment on how good Pavia is at slipping out of those tackles. That's why, it's going to be imperative for the interior defensive line to help out too. But here's a big thing. In the Alabama and Texas games, the games that Vanderbilt played against elite competition at home, beat one of them, and then lost a one-score game to the other, they did not give up a single sack in that game. Alabama fell to Vanderbilt. Texas fought for their life. In two games that Vanderbilt won, but not because of their offense, with Kentucky and Auburn. Kentucky had 3 sacks on Pavia. Auburn had 3 sacks on Pavia. Vanderbilt scored 20 and 17 points respectively. I think if you can keep Vanderbilt to 17, they win this game. And that's going to be contingent on them being able to get to the quarterback. Both those teams had 3 sacks in both those games. If you're able to get Pavia to the ground 3 times, you're going to be consistently putting them behind the chains to the point where your offense doesn't even have to be as great as they were against A&M. You're going to put yourself in a position to keep Vanderbilt under 20, and you're going to have a really good chance of winning this thing coming away if you're able to just get to Pavia and take him down.
Well, outside of getting to the quarterback, we know South Carolina also very good at taking the ball away. However, this is a Vanderbilt offense that does not give it away very often. Only 5 turnovers on the entire year, which is 5th best in the entire nation. It's going to be a tough test to try and get extra possessions out of this game, especially with a guy like Pavia who again can buy time and for the most part makes smart throws that don't put the ball in harm's way as much as you would think he normally would. So South Carolina, if they can get some takeaways today, going to be a big key in winning this game.
It's going to be huge, and you're going to have to get 1 or 2, right? And that's the thing with this Vanderbilt team is we have a defense in South Carolina that forces a ton of turnovers and has been mastering the takeaways this year. You have an offense in Vanderbilt, which might be the most self-aware unit in all of college football. They know what they can do. They know what they can't do. And part of that result of that is just not turning the ball over. So something's going to have to give. And when you just look at this matchup too, I don't know if there's a matchup for some of these edge rushers for South Carolina. I don't know if Junior Sherrill and some of those guys on the perimeter are going to be able to get much space from guys like O'Donnell Fortune and Judge Collier. It's going to be one of those games that the punch-out's going to be big. All those drills that Clayton White talks about during the week of punch-outs and just making fumbles happen are going to have to be a big part of this game too, because the one thing Vanderbilt doesn't do is beat themselves, but the one thing South Carolina's defense is really good at is making you beat yourself. So that's an interesting dynamic to be able to keep up with throughout today's game.
And lastly, of course, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, it is expected to rain today. So anytime you talk about a wet football, that's a concern for special teams. You have one of the better punters in the SEC in Kai Kroger. I want to give Alex Herrera a lot of credit. He made all of his kicks last week, including a big clutch one to tie the game up before halftime. But he's going to have his work cut out for him today trying to kick a wet ball up there in Nashville.
He is. Yeah. If you're South Carolina's offense, you got to almost look at being in 4-down territory until you get to the Vanderbilt 25, 20 maybe, because the conditions are going to be a little harder to kick a football. And as better as Alex has been kicking the ball, and that field goal he made, that pressure kick at the end of the first half against Texas A&M to tie it at 20 and basically give you a reset going into the second half was massive. Can't be understated. And Alex Herrera was a key part of winning that game and the biggest win you've had this year. But at the same time, I don't want to have to put him in a position in rainy conditions to have to kick a 47-plus yarder. That's not his bag, right? You at this point, I think you're good enough offensively, especially in the run game, that if it's 4th down on the Vanderbilt 35 and it's 4th and 3, you got to feel good going for it because of the improvement of your offensive line in the run game. Having Lenoris and Rocket, the 2 big athletic bodies back there to be able to push a pile, you got to be able to convert on some of those 4th and shorts. And I feel like this is going to be a game that until you do get to about, I think I can set it at the Vandy 25 as the magic yard line to kick or not kick, but to maybe be a little more aggressive on 4th down until you get to that part of the field.
It is Gamecocks game day. Tyler Head broadcasting live from O'Hara's Bakery in downtown Lexington. Elijah is in Nashville getting you set for the Gamecocks and the Commodores coming up today at 4:15. We'll get our lowdown from our guy Preston Thorne coming up next as game day rolls along here on the game. Welcome back in. It is Gamecocks Game Day. Tyler Head live at O'Hara's Bakery in downtown Lexington. Elijah Campbell out there in Nashville getting you set for the Gamecocks and the Commodores today coming up at 4:15. Time to take a look at what's happening around the country in the SEC and the top 25. One SEC game underway right now, Texas and Florida. Still 0-0. Texas actually just missed a field goal on their opening drive of the game to attempt to take the lead there. But that is the one SEC contest in action as of right now. Elsewhere on the top 25 scoreboard, Ohio State and Purdue locked at 0. Georgia Tech, a early 7-0 lead over number 4 Miami. Elijah, remember last year that was the game that Mario Cristobal blew by not taking a knee on the ball and ended up embarrassing himself quite a bit. So hopefully going to try and avoid that today as Miami looks to stay undefeated.
Yeah, Mario Cristobal learned the hard way that sometimes, bro, it's just easier to take the knee and end the game. That, your chances of winning are 100% if you kneel the ball. Even if it's 99% that you don't, you probably should do the math and play the numbers game a little bit. I mean, he became a meme forever. He'll never live that one down, ever.
Absolutely.
Not to me, at least.
Only 2 ranked versus ranked matchups happening this weekend, both those in the SEC. Of course, the primetime matchup tonight, Alabama, number 11, going on the road to Death Valley, taking on number 15, LSU, in a game that we've all deemed kind of a playoff eliminator of sorts, where the loser is probably going to be on the outside looking in and have to settle for the Citrus Bowl instead of playing for the College Football Playoff National Championship.
Yep, I already am going to call my shot now. LSU wins that, man. Alabama has proven absolutely nothing to me in terms of their ability to keep their composure on the road. They lost their composure at Vanderbilt despite being the better team. They lost their composure against Tennessee despite being the better team. And I just don't think that trend goes upward whenever you have to go into Death Valley at night and play. That's especially if there's a live tiger that it came from an unknown, unverified source from the state of Florida that's going to be on the sidelines.
Hashtag not my tiger, according to a lot of people down there in Nashville. It is not Mike the Tiger. It's one named Omar that they found in Florida for whatever reason, but still going to be a crazy atmosphere. Anytime LSU and Alabama play, there's always something big on the line. And again, for the first time in this new 12-team era, we have a true elimination game for both sides.
It feels great. It feels great. And yeah, the unverified source of a live tiger on the sideline. What could possibly go wrong? But no, that's the best part about this game. It isn't just that you have the historical rivalry and significance of Alabama and LSU. It's not just that College Game Day's there, but it's that somebody's going to have their season crushed tonight. Somebody. Would it be LSU or Alabama? And here's the wild thing, too. LSU can still lose tonight's game by tiebreaker, still backdoor their way into an SEC championship game, lose the SEC championship game, have 4 losses, and break the trend that we thought at the beginning of the year that whoever's playing in the SEC title game is automatically in, because the winner's automatically in. And it's always assumed that the team that they play will be in as well, despite losing the title game. LSU can test that theory with a loss tonight and still backdooring their way in. They can test it.
You've got me cross-eyed over here. I love when college football gets weird, but that's just absolutely ridiculous. And the other ranked versus ranked matchup going to be happening about the same time as South Carolina and Vanderbilt. Ole Miss, number 16, playing host to number 3 Georgia. Ole Miss back up against the wall themselves, can't afford a third loss. And Georgia, the one loss already to Alabama earlier on this year, still in control of its trip of making it to Atlanta here in a couple weeks.
Yep, both teams clearly in control of their own destiny. This is going to come down to, because I think Ole Miss is going to move the ball on Georgia. I think they figured some stuff out. Arkansas is a really good defense. Nobody puts up 63 points on Arkansas and throws for 515 yards. I think Ole Miss has figured it out a little bit. They figured out offense. I think they'll move the ball on Georgia. The key is going to be, does Carson Beck throw multiple interceptions in this game? If he does, like he has the last few weeks, they will not survive. If you get the Carson Beck from last week, they will not survive the trip to Oxford. That's a big one to watch. 11 picks in 5 games. He can't be that today.
All 11 of those picks coming against SEC opponents, by the way. 10 touchdowns to 11 interceptions in conference play so far. So 2 big matchups to be able to watch today across the SEC. We will come back. We will wrap up our portion of the show. Talk to our guy, Jack Beltry, also on the ground there in Nashville. Get his final thoughts and keys as we get set for South Carolina and Vanderbilt coming up today at 4:15 right here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is Gamecocks Game Day. Tyler Head live at O'Hara's Bakery in downtown Lexington. Elijah Campbell out there in Nashville getting set for the Gamecocks and the Commodores coming up here in a little under 4 hours. Also going to check in with our guy, Jack Veltri, also on the ground out there in Nashville as well. Jack, I hope you got more sleep than Elijah did ahead of today's game. How are we doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I got a few. How much sleep did he get today? Did he not sleep well at all, or what's the deal?
Well, right about 2 hours, right, Elijah?
Yeah, 2 hours. Jack, I got off the air at 11 o'clock for the high school football scoreboard show and immediately hopped in my car and drove here. So we got about 2 hours. Yeah, no, it wasn't a case of the old Broadway flu, if you will.
Dude, yeah, I had the Broadway flu last night. I guess that was it was fun. But look, I got enough sleep. I packed it in around midnight here, which I guess is 1 a.m. back home. But yeah, we had fun, and now we're ready to roll today.
Well, Jack, as we look at this game, again, South Carolina feels like they probably got snubbed from being out of the college football playoff top 25 this past week. Huge win last week in breaking that streak of losing to ranked teams. We talked about this all week long. I really feel like they have a point to prove today by backing up what they did last week with hopefully another impressive win. For
sure. There's definitely something to prove, right? I mean, they're 5-3 on the year, but they very well could be 7-1 right now, 6-2. They should be better than what the record shows. And yeah, I mean, look, 3 lost teams getting into the playoff rankings, it's tougher because there was only one team that got in, and that was Louisville, and they just came off a big win over Clemson. Now, look, I think South Carolina should be in the top 25. I think a lot of other people feel the same way. But guess what? You have a great opportunity to go out here this week and beat a very good football team on the road, and just let everything take care of itself. If you keep winning games, you're going to get into the rankings, and it shouldn't matter right now. On December 8th, that should matter if you're ranked or not.
Yeah. When looking at this matchup today, Jack, too, like the turnover differential is big in every game, but Vanderbilt does a really good job of not turning the ball over, and they don't take a lot of sacks, too. The South Carolina defense, on the other hand, is really good at turning teams over. They're really good at getting quarterbacks to the ground and burying them. What is South Carolina going to have to do today to be able to make sure that they buck the trend of teams not being able to get Diego Pavia on the ground or getting him to turn the ball over?
Well, I think they have to take advantage of their opportunities today, Elijah, because one of the things that also needs to be mentioned is the fact of how much time Vanderbilt takes off the clock. Because, they usually are really good with the time possession. And, a team like Alabama, when they came in here and lost to Vanderbilt dominated the time possession, and yet Alabama still scored 35 points. So the point is, you got to be able to take advantage of your chances that you do have on offense, and then on defense. Look, this is going to be a team that is very tough to stop. Like you said, they don't turn the ball over much. They're very disciplined. They are a very well-balanced team and a good oiled machine. So I think for South Carolina, try to force some mistakes if you can. Force Pavia to throw a little bit. I know he's a little banged up and all, but I think that's what you have to do today.
And when it comes to Lenore Sellers, again, we saw his best all-around performance last week. Escaped God knows how many sacks in that game against A&M, and it's probably going to have to do something similar today. And you kind of wonder if that performance last week was kind of the spark point of him being a newer and better version of Lenore Sellers going forward starting today.
Absolutely. Like, that is the quintessential type of performance you want out of your starting quarterback, the guy that, look, the blocking was pretty good last week, but it wasn't perfect. There were times where Sellers definitely had to make some magic on his own, and that's what you're going to need, not just this game, but every game the rest of the year, because, look, Sellers, I feel like, takes this team as far as it can go, and when he's at his best, this team is at its best, and when he's not, they're not. So I think for today, you need Sellers to do a little bit of both, a little bit of the running, a little bit of the pass, and do it efficiently.
Right. And offensively, too, I mean, doing a little bit of the pass, too, man, is a big thing. Josh Simon broke out last week, 4 catches for $132, 2 touchdowns. At the same time, he's not going to sneak up on anybody. What receivers today do you think will be a bigger part of the game plan than maybe they were last week against A&M?
I would say with Mazio Bennett being back, I feel like he's going to play a big part in this game. I feel like he just has to. Another guy, it wouldn't surprise me, he's not even really a receiver, but tight end Michael Smith. I feel like he has kind of been a little quiet lately, and he's too good of a player to be this quiet for so long. I expect him to have a little bit of a better day if he's out there and playing and whatnot, but Definitely going to see a lot of guys involved, but I don't even know if there'll be a heavy reliance on the passing game today, just because the weather's not going to be super great by the time we get to kickoff. I would expect the run game to be the focal point today, and let's see if Rocket Sanders can have another big day.
Jack, final thoughts from you. What is going to be the final score after 4 quarters up there in Nashville?
Yeah, I think South Carolina is going to come out of here with a victory today. I feel like a lot of people are feeling that way, and rightfully so. I have South Carolina winning this game 28-25. It's going to be a real bloodbath, kind of a real back-and-forth game, and I wouldn't be surprised if South Carolina is trailing at certain points of this game. But I think the resiliency of this team to come back and make it a fight are going to be enough to where they're going to be able to win.
Sounds good to me, Jack. Hopefully we're talking about plenty of good things come Monday for our usual Reaction Monday. Stay safe out there. Be safe getting back, and hopefully we're talking about a win.
Yeah, fellas. It's good to talk with y'all. See y'all again soon.
Absolutely. Again, Jack Beltry from Gamecock Central. And, of course, he hit on a lot of the high points there. And we're kind of talking about keys to the game. Like he said, don't turn the ball over. This is a team in Vanderbilt that is very good at holding on to the rock themselves. South Carolina routinely does not win games where they lose the turnover battles. So Sellers got to be very good at holding on to the football as well as everybody else on the offense. And if the defense can generate some takeaways, it's going to be a big key in what could be a game where possessions are very, very limited.
When trying to project this game, it oftentimes does come down to the units you trust the most. I trust South Carolina's defensive line to be able to get to Diego Pavia more than I trust Vanderbilt's fundamentally sound offensive line to keep Dylan Stewart from eating him, right? Eating Diego Pavia. Yeah. I now, after seeing it for a couple games against 2 of the better defenses in the conference, I trust Lenoris Sellers now more with the football in his hands than I have at any point during the season, because now we're starting to see a trend of him taking care of the football. I now trust this running game to be able to get out on the perimeter, the receivers blocking on the perimeter, the tackles pulling out, and the guards pulling out to the perimeter to block better, to be able to get a consistent run game going. I trust South Carolina's defense to force turnovers more than I trust Vanderbilt's ability to avoid the turnovers, right? And sometimes it can be a matter of the ball bouncing one way or another, because we've seen them punch out a lot of fumbles this year. I just trust the strength of South Carolina in that regard more than I do Vanderbilt's ability to avoid those disasters in that regard. So when I just look at this matchup and looking really at a conflicting amount of styles here in terms of what these teams and these units do well and don't do well, I just trust South Carolina to be able to make the plays in a forcing way, as opposed to Vanderbilt in a reactive way.
Yeah, as Preston kind of alluded to when Terry was talking to him earlier, got to play assignment football. Got to manage your gaps in the run game. Got to be efficient when it comes to blocking on the offense. And again, it could be an ugly, nasty game being played in the rain today, and whoever's the most technically sound team may walk out of this one with the victory.
Yeah, when it's up to the nasties on the line of scrimmage, man, that's the one thing. Kennard and Stewart get all the talk, as they should, because they are unblockable on the edge, and having to single on one of those guys is a nightmare scenario for any team. But this is the game where Tonka Hemingway is going to have a really big game. TJ Sanders is going to have a game that he's always been having. You need Boogie to step up and be able to hop in, especially considering there's no Nick Barrett and DeAndre Jules today. It's going to be imperative for those 3 guys in the middle to be able to play extra snaps and to be able to run stop and also help create pressure up the middle. That way you force Pavia outside and into the hands of Kennard and Stewart.
Well, and I was going to say, when you force him to the outside, you're also going to be looking at a guy like Demetrius Knight, who's probably going to be spying on Pavia for a lot of this game, to be able to keep his eyes on him and make sure he doesn't get too far down the field. And even if he does, we know you got some help in the secondary with Nicky Minori, who did a really good job of containing someone like Jalen Milroe earlier this season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. Nick Emenwari has turned himself into a first-round draft prospect this year. Mel Kiper as the number 2 safety for a reason. The guy flies all over the place. I just trust this defense in those levels to get it all done. 31-17 Gamecocks.
I think it's going to be tight, just like you said, 31-20 Gamecocks. Hopefully we're talking about a big victory come Monday. Appreciate everyone out here at O'Hara's allowing us to be out here for Gamecocks game day. Elijah, try and get some sleep after this game, okay?
I'll take me a fat nap. How about that?
Appreciate Dave back in the studio. The SEC report coming up next, and then it'll be network pregame coverage leading up to the 4:15 kick between the Gamecocks and the Commodores. This has been Gamecocks Game Day. For Elijah Campbell and Captain Dave back in the studio, I'm Tyler Head. Thanks so much for joining us on Game Day here in the Game.